Monster Hunter as a franchise is filled to the brim with so many magnificent highs as well as depressing lows. And these peaks and valleys have been well documented throughout YouTube and our collective consciousness. They fill the front mind so often that it is frequent we ignore the other interesting points within the series. Have you ever encountered those fights that, when all said and done with, leave a lot to be desired? Those fights that feel the slightest bit empty, not really resonating with you, sometimes to a point of forgetting about it in future instances? Fights that are disappointing? That, my friends, is the feeling of mediocrity. And today, we shall be discussing and looking over 10 monsters that, to me, fill these bills perfectly. Now, before we dive into the deep end, we need to set up some ground rules. This list was honestly one of the hardest videos I have ever made up till this point, and trying to figure out how to rank all of these individuals, much less talk about them all without repeating points ad nauseum, was a grueling task. So to hopefully help me out, I set up 3 ground rules to guide me. Number 1, design. A good and impactful design says everything that needs to be said without words, embodying the monster's traits, personality, as well as style in battle all in one. It is the first thing you see upon entering into the arena and or cutscene, so you better make sure it delivers and resonates. Monsters that fail in this regard either do not embody any of these aspects or go halfway with it, or are stale and uninteresting. Number 2, the fight. Appearances, though, are just appearances, and the real worth of a monster is determined in the arena. Since a lot of people in the community look for different things within the fight, I'm going to be looking at it from a combined perspective of fun and challenge. Factors such as the fight dragging on for too long or not being long enough, lack of variety, boredom, and more can affect this. It should also be worth noting that annoying or frustrating features within a hunt can factor into the feeling of disappointment or mediocrity, but only under very specific circumstances. Again, this list is about mediocre monsters, not my least favorites. That's for later. And number 3, replay value. Why should we care about coming back to this monster? In other words, rare drops, gear value, etc. are all minor factors into this, and this is also the smallest, most insignificant criteria of them all, though it can help. One last thing to mention, I will be putting a restriction on beginning tier monsters. The whole point of monsters such as this is to ease the player into the game and thus be generally easy and mediocre when approached from an angle later on into the game. If one were to appear in this list, then it would be from a perspective around the time you would face it, and judging it for other things besides easiness. Got all that written down? Good, because even then, this was an incredibly troublesome list to pin down, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of people eyeing me suspiciously with what I just said in regards to my placements. With all that said though, grab your best weapons, I suppose, or don't. Some potions and whatever armor you have, I guess. For these are my top 10 most mediocre and or disappointing Monster Hunter monsters. And starting off the bat, I feel that this first entry might just be one of the most controversial entries on the list. What was that I said earlier about diving off into the deep end again? Because fuck me, I'm really getting ahead of myself. But in any case, gentlemen, ladies, Ryan, I'm sorry. I remember a time leading up to the release of Generations where everyone was asking one another, which team are you on? Astalos, Gameth, Mizutsune, or Viglavinus? I kept swapping sides, if I recall correctly, every time this conversation was brought up. because trying to choose a definitive favorite before and even shortly afterwards was a grueling task. In the end, however, and after the dust settled, I could definitively say what wasn't. And I am so sorry, because honest to God, there is a reason why Gammoth is this low down, and it's all because of the aspects surrounding her. Her design is phenomenal, S tier without a doubt, a gigantic breath of fresh air in a series filled with draconian, bird, and raptor designs. Her motif and theming, especially around the gear and their designs, are really neat. The movement and weight put into her attacks can only be described as chunky with a capital C, making you really feel the force she puts into said attacks. And her theme is such a good tune to listen to, especially with what appears to be Mongolian throat singing from time to time. But in regards to the beastie herself, she is clearly the weakest out of the Fated Four. I hear a statement so commonly from critics of Generations and Gen U, saying that the game is too easy, or more specifically, that the monsters stand no chance against you. It is one I disagree with quite a bit, mainly because even with all the power you and your team might have, you all still need to carry your weight, with some of the monsters, especially in the endgame and with the EXs, that'll make fucking mincemeat out of you for one miscalculation. Gammoth, however, is that one exception to the rule to me. Due to her gigantic nature and lack of speed, Gammoth becomes one of the greatest subjects for bullying in the entire game. Barely able to put up a fight, much less do any significant harm even with her bulk because of all the staggers, KOs, breaks, and especially mounts you'll be able to get on her. Hell, you don't even need 4 people to cheese her. Just go aerial style and watch as she literally crumbles to the floor over and over again, maybe occasionally causing that one dismount hiccup depending on her proximity to the wall. It isn't just the fact that she can be easy, it's the fact that her moves come out so slowly and telegraphed that any tension or enjoyment in the fight becomes dwarfed by how monotonous and dragged out it can be. Which certainly isn't helped considering her gigantic health pool. This issue wouldn't be as prevalent to me if it also wasn't for the variety or lack thereof in the fight, especially in visual stimulus. But all she really does is just a ton of variations of stomps, kicks, charges, slams, the G-rank sit down, which admittedly is my favorite move in her entire arsenal, and maybe the occasional shot and spray. And she can spam some of these moves so fucking much. I have had instances where she repeatedly used the sit down all within a single minute. It's not only kind of annoying due to tremor and wanting to see something different, but also just drags the fight on for longer than necessary with how as soon as I see the windup, I gotta sheathe my weapon and run away, then come back in to hit her again, rinse and repeat. If she were to ever come back in a future game, then I do hope she puts up a better fight. This upcoming monster is an ironic case among the list, mainly with the fact that at release, this was far from a disappointment. It was a monster that I quite liked in fact, but time has not been the kindest to this monster, and in hindsight, Seranio is pretty lackluster. This was perhaps the single greatest entry on the list that I actively debated myself on, asking quite frequently, is he even a disappointment? And, well, the answer to that is tricky. By all means, compared to other monsters, Seranio is more than fine. He's got a unique fighting style, cool movement, clever use of the flying wyvern skeleton, and even introduced a new ailment to the series in the form of bleeding. Where he falls apart, however, is when you consider the fact that Seranio is a flagship, a group of monsters with insane popularity and weight behind them. They have to not only hit hard at release, but resonate throughout the franchise. And I'm sorry, but every other flagship, even my least favorite ones, evoke some form of strong emotion. Meanwhile, Seranio evokes an whatever kind of feeling, which as a flagship is not a feeling that should occur. Not to mention, I find that Seranio really did not age all that well. Oh cool, a flying wyvern rival to Rathalos that tries to go toe-to-toe with him. Then, literally one game later, we get Astalos, who not only makes way more sense to be a rival, but absolutely demolishes Rathalos in his home turf, making Seranio feel just really weak in comparison. Oh cool, a new status ailment in the form of Bleed! Only for certain monsters afterwards to not only also get Bleed, but execute it way more efficiently and in a more dangerous manner. There's only so many times where he can keep kicking me and I can feel threatened before being able to duck to the side and be like, oh wait, never mind. Even when you get Bleed, it feels really easy to cure it away, when other monsters such as Ruiner are absolutely relentless on you at all times. Then there's this integration into For You's story, which is still good, don't get me wrong, but feels as if it was resolved way too quickly, leaving a lot of missed potential. The moments where he cucks you out of a rafting capture is neat. Yeah, it makes you want to get payback on him, but for that payback to be worth it, the tension needs to build. The showdown with other flagships like Gore and Laggy worked so well because we saw how big of a threat they were and also had multiple encounters over the course of a narrative, finally delivering on all that buildup with the last battle. Meanwhile, a few minutes later, after coming back from the quest and being forced to abandon because the monster is too dangerous, we get to fight with Seranio. What? You see what I mean, right? Doesn't it feel as if there was some important middle step missing? Also, the idea of the Seranio swarm and how it is an even greater threat than the impending Kushala Daora attack is really cool, but I wish we could have seen the danger of a swarm outside of a cutscene just showing it. Like, yeah, he appears in other areas throughout the campaign, but why should it be such a big deal to me if I've already killed one? Once again, in a situation similar to Gammoth, Seranio is this low onto the list because of his unique fighting style and moves and, by all accounts, being a good monster. But there is so much potential involved with him that was just wasted. And now he feels like a washed up drunk uncle, with every single one of his cousins doing a better job than him. Also, this is a slightly unrelated note, but can we please get a new fucking armor design? Yes, I get it. Seranio's whole motif is blades, cuts, and the number 1,000, which the game beats into your damn skull at every opportunity it gets. But for 3 games straight, it's been the same design over and over again, with the only difference between, say, the high and G-rank version being that silver replaces brown at certain points on the armor. He really did get the short end of the stick when it came to the 4th generation. Wandering into the territory of subspecies and other forms for such a topic is one hell of a slippery slope, let me tell you. Due to the lackluster way, let's just put it, the early gens handled subspecies, there were so many good candidates that I could have chosen. So many, in fact, that over half of this list could have been filled with them. But I try to be a man of variety, so I resisted the temptation to do so. That being said, one factor that popped into my head considering subspecies was the idea of, can it even be called a disappointment if the original wasn't that good, and the sub doesn't do much to change it? I mean, yeah, sure, there's always the potential of what if, but you gotta set your expectations realistically. All of this to say that, god damn it, Brute, you could have been so much more. I'm gonna tell you all a true story. A story to lay the background for this entry. Here I am, one night playing Monster World Iceborne with my compatriot Quentin, when he decides to post a Brute Tyrex investigation. I hadn't fought Brute at this point, didn't want to go all the way for grinding lands to get the Veil high enough, and was pretty curious to see what could have changed and improved. So I sent up for the quest, entered into the Elder's Recess with my Nami Lawn Sword, charging headstrong to face this endgame threat. After all, the changes both the metal rafts had were gigantic and well deserving of Elder level threats, and Scarred was annoyingly difficult. So I was curious to see what Brute could do. Cut to 15 minutes later and I'm left with the feeling of, that was it? I mean, I'm already not a fan of Tyrex unless it's Dio, but Christ alive, I didn't think my hype could get any lower than it already was, going from a damn stump to a shriveling sapling. Hell, I fucking fought a tempered Tyrex around that time and perhaps even slightly before, and that felt more endgame than this thing. I honestly have no clue what to call this phenomenon, or even how to describe it, but I'll try. It was like one of those videos you watch of a guy on stage doing a musical performance, only the music has been cut out, so all you're left with is the silencing awkwardness of the guy's creaking shoes and movements along the floor, and whatever else he does. Yeah, that uncomfortable. Moments within the fight where I could have sworn that should have hit me, to the point of feeling too forgiving. Some moments where the complete opposite happened, and I was scratching my head on how that may have hit me when it didn't previously. Attacks with such a weak impact and oomph to them that it felt like a damn Yao coming my way, and a case of trying to imitate its older, cooler cousin Frontier, only to forget what made that attack so powerful and cool. At no point with Brute Tyrex' fight do I feel truly in danger, like I have to be instinctual and quick on my feet to survive. Rather, it all felt lethargic, like I was watching something slowly die and it was putting up one last pitiful fight. It was, in all intents and purpose, an easier Tyrex, which meant I should have liked it, but I didn't. Because difficulty does not automatically equate to the quality of something, much less difficulty done right. So when you have an endgame equivalent that feels half-assed and lacking when compared to the base version, you know you fucked it up. And to think an easier solution was right there in front of him for an endgame Tyrex. Molten does in fact exist, guys. You know, as an anniversary title, the Generations games do a pretty good job at celebrating the franchise's history. Not a perfect job, mind you. There are definitely some monsters who I think are missing from the party, but a good job. I mean, just look at this roster and the returning monsters. Legaicus, Shogun Zerator, Nargacuga, Barioth, Berith, Lao Shanlun, Diablos. All candidates that make a lot of sense with coming back. And clearly, no one deserves to be more worthy of returning than Giadrome. Who the fuck wrote this into my script? I really was tempted to clump all the drones into one single spot on this list just because of how repetitive and copy-paste they all are. But my complaints about them are more so negative. So I suppose for now, the next best punching bag would be their albino cousin. Ladies and gentlemen, witness Generation 1 and 2 innovation and originality firsthand. You take this blue raptor dude, recolor the mob white, then take a look at such a well-fleshed out and deserving entity within the universe and say, fuck it, this thing deserves to have its own distinguished name and pack. Give the Aggies some credit. At least they change up more between each other than just an element and color difference. This is just straight up lazy. Literally, the only difference between this and the common drones you'd find is that he can blight you with his bite and throw up a snowman inflicting ball. That's it. Truly, we as a franchise have regressed since those glory days. Now, if this was any other list or situation, I just group Gia in with all the other drones and call it a day. But what solidifies Gia onto this entry is a point that I've already mentioned through the intro. Call this salt, if you will, But I find it really bothersome when out of all of the other monsters that sorely deserved to return and come back for fans, that this thing gets in instead. Oh, and not just gets into the game, but also gets into the subsequent G-Rank expansion. Gia is nowhere to be found in Generations, which just begs the question, what point does this Monsters Edition even serve, much less add to this experience? This is the same expansion, keep in mind, that had big league monsters such as Drusilla, Busarios, Gravios, Lao Shanlun, the Fatalis, and Diablos, who might as well be the series mascot alongside Ravlos, return. Because, oh yeah, sure, truly the Gen 1 and 2 veterans haven't gotten enough love and attention as of late. Nostalgia is one hell of a drug. Look, Capcom, I realize and understand the thought process behind this. You don't want to waste the gimmick of a semi-water battling world, not after all the work on Mediocre, even if he was scrapped. But why does it have to be utilized on a literal gray lava seal free skin? Jaredtodus, aka Mudsioff, or whatever you want to call him, has to honestly be one of the biggest disappointments in a long time, at least in regards to Monster Hunter. For a monster who might as well be the spiritual successor to the laggy battle that we would never get in World, as well as something with parasitic origins in its yun, Jaredtodus is really fucking boring when you get down to it. Besides a few design differences, Judah might as well just be a gray lava seal, borrowing about half or more of his attacks. He swims, he bites, he spits, he dives, and that's about it. I honestly barely remembered his new G-Rank move until recently when I had to grab footage for this video, just because of how rarely I saw it, much less if I even fought him. Because whereas with most, if not every other monster in the game like Gyros, no matter how boring or bad they are, I could say that there is some worth in coming back to fight them, especially with Gaiden Lands in the Augment system. Jiraiya, though, has nothing. His only point within the game is to give some options for water weapons, be a bridge into other monster paths, and that's about it. If I wanted a damn water dual blade, I'll just go for the Royal Savior daggers or even the fucking fish dual blades. You laugh at these fishies, but soon so too shall you meet your demise by their sharp bite. But I don't just say Jaredtodus has nothing just for the sake of hyperbole. No, he literally serves no purpose in the game overall besides what's just been mentioned. Because, guess what? He does not appear in the Gaiden Lands. He is the only basic large monster in the entire game, aside from Bayo and a few others excluded to events like Safi, to not be in the Gaiden Lands. He is not only forgettable as shit, a factor that certainly isn't helped by his sequestered battleground, but he also serves no overarching purpose or point to the game. Now, that doesn't mean I ask for every monster in the game to have top tier weapons or be meta-defining. Fuck no. I just want some purpose to them aside from going back into low and high rank in order to get these Frostfane weapons all for the sake of busy work. Really though, I think it says a lot about the quality of the monster when I'm getting a bigger challenge from the environment rather than anything it can pull out of its own ass. Show of hands. Who forgot that rubybusarios even existed? This honestly has to be one of the laziest variations of a monster I have ever seen in the main series. And that's saying something, because the best way to describe rubybusarios is staring at a crystalline-coated rock for about 15 minutes. That's it. Really, Capcom? subspecies and variations this lame are no longer an excuse. Knowing that this is the 4th generation, and that ever since 3rd gen, you have had subs such as Glacial Ignator, Baleful Giganox, the Laggy family, Stygian Zinogre, and more. The bar has been raised. If you're not doing your best to make a new sub that meets those expectations or surpassing them, then what even is the point? Much less making a new sub for an old monster that quite literally changes nothing. The one major difference are the crystals on his back that can be mined and fall off from him attacking. How thrilling. What a game changer for a monster that's already as boring as a rock. If I wanted to go mine, I could do it in any other area or any other monster with such a mechanic. In all seriousness though, that's honestly all I can say about rubybusarios without dragging this entry on ad nauseum. It's just a boring as fuck monster at base, a disappointing subspecies at a point in the series when so much was being done with them, and a concept so easily forgotten due to the fact that it was exclusive to the Everwoods. This ain't no furtive pygmy, I'll tell you that much. Out of all the other classifications and groups of monsters, aside from the flagships, the elder dragons seem especially vulnerable to the syndrome of high expectations or standards only to fall flat or have a resounding meh. And it's pretty obvious to see why. These monsters, after all, are the big endgame hunts and challenges, gods of the monster world that carry entire legends and disasters on their back. When it comes to gigantic disappointments, 2 elders come to mind. First up, we have Lao Shan Lun, known as the Old Mountain Dragon and revered for being the progenitor of the Large Elder Dragon, or Siege Battles as they are known by. In regards to iconography, he's definitely deserving of such a status not only with the battle, but also in the unique quadruped lizard design with no wings that was quite fascinating at the time. Unfortunately, for something as large as this, and keeping in mind that the creature's entire goal is to be a little bitch and run, the battle isn't all that interesting or fun. Dare I say, the Lao Shan Lun battle is the textbook definition for what can go wrong when it comes to these battles. Lack of diverse action, often involving repetitive movements such as the case with the artillery located throughout? Check. Sluggish pace that takes quite a while to even get through or change locales? You betcha. Vacancy of any real threat or challenge that the creature can pose? But of course. Obnoxiously designed battle involving the use of invisible health gates, ensuring that even if you try to run through the battle as fast as you can, it's still going to last a while? Even with all the changes that Gen U offers, the fight is still a gigantic snooze fest, feeling like I just took a fucking NyQuil. Then, most recently, we have the kaiju-sized lava turtle himself, Zora Magdaros. I've already gone on record beforehand in previous videos, but suffice to say, this battle is surely something else. All the previous issues stated before about Lao can apply just as well to Zora, sometimes even better. The absence of danger throughout with the easy-to-read magma cores and minimal damage you take, monotonous actions repeated throughout until the beast is finally dead, speed which makes me want to go watch a koala sleeping, etc, etc. Not only that, but Zora also has his own menage a trois of fuckery mixed in. The pace in the battle is shit. Not just in how slow it is, but also with the fact that there's literally nothing to do for a bit once all the magma cores are destroyed. The damage he does to the barrier is absolutely minuscule, looking to be smaller than my dick. The massive circumcision of the tide turner that is the Dragonator, making it feel like a damn wet noodle. The raw canvas that is the Everstream arena, and the destruction of tension or stakes in relation to the story and Nurg. Both of these monsters share common traits among one another, but which one do I think deserves to be higher than the other? Well, there can be arguments made for either or, but if I may, at least with Lao, I can reliably say that there isn't any squandered potential or buildup involved with it. It is a boring as piss battle, yeah, but it does what it sets out to do successfully, even if not in the best or most engaging way possible. The feeling of trying your damnedest to dissuade a walking mountain from continuing onwards, knowing that it just keeps moving forward regardless, ever closer to that fortress wall. Also, to be blunt, by the time I fought Lao, I didn't have all that high of expectations regardless. Meanwhile with Zora, the story tries its absolute hardest to make you care about the cataclysmic effect Zora can have if he succeeds. Shit about how everything rides on this whole operation, or how the success of a mission hinges on us dealing with the Nergigante, only for it all to flop massively when it comes to gameplay execution. You can fucking wait on the Nerg to leave, and the game or story doesn't give a shit. This isn't just a pet peeve, people. This is an issue that affects the game of base world on numerous occasions throughout its runtime, and it sucks. Also, there's a general fact that unlike Lao, I had actual hype and expectations for Zora via all the trailers prior to release, detailing what might be the next big step in the series since For You. Knowing that there is a monster this massive in scale with such a unique concept and battle, and then get this shit Sunday on the birthday. I think it's just a lot when over a goddamn year of World's development was spent on treating this festering wound, rigging up the model in the back to ensure everything works, and it still echoed into the chamber with a resounding wet fart. You had one job, Zora. One job. I feel that the deviants from the Generations games honestly get a pretty bad rep. I mean, compared to the fucking atrocity and sin that was the Apex and Y-Stone system, the idea of having selective versions of a monster that have evolved and adapted through previous battles, granting you cool and unique gear, sounds really amazing. Yes, the grind for a single armor to get to the max level, even at bare minimum, was fucking insane and exhaustive. Yes, the music that plays and repeats for every single one of them, aside from Bloodbath, really gets on your nerves by the 5th listen. But I'd honestly take those aspects over the guild quest system from For You any day of the week, knowing that I'm going to get what I want by the end. Then I see Crystal Beard and I can understand why it gets a bad rep. Depending on your point of view, the spot of worst deviant ever either goes to the Dread King Rathalos or the Crystal Beard Urigan. Arguments can be made for both. But in regards to disappointment and wasting the potential of the deviants, Crystal Beard takes the trophy, no contest. Once again, in a situation all too similar to the rubybusarios, we have a design that could have been so much more, but chooses the bare minimum of changes, even down to the use of crystals on the body as the big deal breaker. And oh boy, how about that fight, eh? That fight that does literally nothing? The most variation you'll see is a single crystal rock or two fling out of his rock throw attack, which are mineable and have the oh so great distinction of sometimes emitting sleep gas. For a monster that is supposedly a treasure trove of precious ores, I certainly don't feel it being as such with all these volatile coals I'm getting. Pretty sure I haven't been naughty, whatever that means anymore. I am dead fucking serious when I say that for 10 whole ranks, 10 whole levels of this monster, that this is what you are getting. A shinier Urigan, which is just more Urigan. Yay, have fun. Red Helm Arzuros and Snow Baron Lagombi end up being more unique and varied than you, and their original versions are of a lower rank. But then what about the G-Rank version? Doesn't that do a bit more? Well, yes, there is more going on, but also no in the fact that it only helps a bit. Doesn't change all that much, and doesn't fix the fact that you had to go through 10 levels of this monster previously, 30 times perhaps, if you wanted the armor. Contrary to what the armor skills want to tell you, fate is certainly not on your side. There's a reason why at the start of this video I put those ground rules in place to restrict myself of the choices I can make. So often, the possibility of talking about the aspects about the fight that annoy me or make me dislike the monster popped into my head, especially with how hard to craft this video was. But, as I said before, this is a list about the most mediocre and or disappointing monsters for me, not my least favorites. Regardless, I bring all this up because I feel that in order to properly lay down the foundation of just how big of a disappointment this entry was, that I'm going to need to break my rules somewhat, requiring myself to delve a little bit into least favorites territory with some of my complaints. Not without proper reasoning, of course, but still. So, who is my number one? Well, the creature in question goes by many names. The Doom of Shrade, the Black Flame, the Crimson Demon, the Devil, the Ancestor of All, and more. Fatalis! Oh boy! If people weren't already livid at my previous decisions, they are sure to be boiling like a bloodbath by now. Not just the fact that I dared to put the Fatalis on a negative list, but all three in one single entry. Now, trust me, I have my reasons for doing this. Just give me the remainder of this video to explain why I did this. Normally, I too am not a fan of this, with it many times feeling as if the creator just didn't have the strength to make a decision to break a tie and just slap two or more entities in one spot. Keyword there being normally. But if the speaker can only explain why they are all clustered together, and more importantly, if all the candidates share enough common traits that the differences aren't too glaring, then it's all fine by me. In this case, not only do I have complaints that can be leveled at all three equally, but the differences between them are few and far between, meaning that I can technically get away with it. Moving on to the actual meat of the discussion, this is yet another factor as to why Frontier shall be sorely missed from me. Knowing how thoroughly fleshed out each version was in realizing the monster, and instead being left with this disappointment as the only alternative now. I legitimately hate this feeling. Years worth of build-up and hype. Hours of reading comments and posts by other people and videos of the beast's music, hearing just how dangerous this mission was and the gratification out of it. Days of expectations building, waiting for the moments when I actually get to fight it, and yes! It's here! At long last, making its grand western return and first time appearance for many. Our battle shall truly be legendary! One for the history books! If only the fight didn't suck out all that enthusiasm like my non-existent girlfriend. Instead, what I'm gifted with, keep in mind, as someone who has watched many videos on Monster Hunter, and especially Frontier, is the stalest, blandest, most cookie cutter of cookies I have ever tasted. The most basic of draconic movements and attacks, the most brain dead of drags and bites, the most rudimentary of fire breaths and blasts, and the most lethargic, overgrown iguana I have ever had the displeasure to witness. Give Lao and Zora some credit. At least their combat capabilities and movement make sense for giant walking kaiju, delivering on the power and or impact for such creatures. What the fuck even is Fatalis' excuse? My great-great-great-grandfather gets out of bed faster than this chuckle schmuck, and he's dead! Fatalis spends a majority of the time either just standing around on his hind legs like a doofus, occasionally turning around and doing something, laying on all fours and then getting back up indecisively, or forgetting that he's supposed to be in an endgame fight, realizing it, then trying to quickly make up for that fact by spamming the snap and drag like a cheapskate. That fucking snap and drag! And if we're talking about the small differences the other two possess, nothing much changes for the better. Crimson is an even greater snooze fest with his insistence on spamming these meteors that are some of the easiest attacks to dodge in the game, having a blast effect on his claw swipe and taking place in my good old friend Ingle. White has the oh-so-great and worthy distinction of, get ready for this earth-shattering revelation, using lightning instead. Whoa, how impressive! For real though, it is literally just all of Fatalis' fire attacks replaced with lightning, an armor mode when enraged that isn't as stupid as it used to be, but is still pretty dumb, and an ultimate move that while looks cool and intimidating on the first run through, can be casually walked through all too similarly to Allah's Ice Ring. Oh, but I'm sure it's all fine. If this is just a boring monster, then I can perfectly deal with it. Nothing will get on my nerves at all. What happened to fun? I can deal with boring monsters. I am accepting of such a reality. And you know, if that was the only thing to the Fatali, just the fact that they are boring and nothing too special, a good number 3 or so he would be. But it's the fact that there is also bullshit like that, which pisses me off. Trash, which not only slows down the enjoyment I can have, but outright shatters it. This right here is why Fatalis tops the list for me. More than just being a monster that does jack diddly squat with its potential. More than failing to be a manifestation, a sampling of what is basically the gods of gods of gods in Monster Hunter. More than being a monster that has all that power and barely shows it off, but how the battle is executed in challenge and fun that makes Fatalis, all 3 of them, my number 1 most mediocre and disappointing monster. A battle so average and bland that it frustrates me. I have been the Monarch of Dragons, and now that Fatalis has been confirmed as the final title update to Iceborne, I just have this to say. Better put all of your weight into it, bucko, because I'll know if you're pulling your punches.